Hello friends, I felt to do a little different kind of video today, and that is one of my backstory. So it's going to be a little more solemn. And part of my backstory is why I do what I do. I have experienced nearly all forms of abuse, and except for satanic ritual abuse, and that came through secondarily, meaning my partner had firsthand experience with satanic ritual abuse, which left an energetic imprint and was transferred to me. So I understood the scope of what SRA is and how it affects the abused. So I have started this video like 25 times, so I'm going to do my best to stay on subject, minus the emotions, but give you as broad a scope as I can of what I have been through and part of the reason why I do what I do. So I grew up the last of 8 children, so I literally had to fight for a place, fight to be heard, fight for things, just fight to exist. I also grew up with very conflictual parents, a lot of yelling and screaming. I remember hiding for my safety. I didn't want to be a part of the yelling, screaming, throwing things. I firmly believe that my mom had a lot of emotional issues herself that were not attended to, and maybe some hormonal and gut issues. And she was very physical, and I sustained a lot of physical abuse from her, and zero support from my dad. Like, that was okay. It was my fault that it happened to me. So coming through that, and that's the only thing that I could experience. I actually was about age 27 before I realized that that level of physical abuse was not normal. Not everybody went through things like that. So that's the only thing that was modeled to me. So I thought that conflict was how you approach marriage. And so my first marriage, both he and I brought a fair amount of baggage and did a number on each other. And I was not self-aware whatsoever in that marriage, and left that marriage at 5 years in. So I spent a long time being single and wishing I weren't. I think it was like 7 years in a very tender age. And my boys were young, and I felt they needed a father figure in my house. It never happened, which is fine. So when the second marriage came around, I really attached hook, line, and sinker. And I learned what narcissism is. And leveled me. That marriage lasted the whole relationship was 3 years. The marriage was 1.5 years. So very, very fast burn type of relationship. And most of the trauma and abuse stemmed from that marriage. Sexual abuse, financial abuse, extreme emotional manipulation. And I was a people pleaser. You know, I came from the parentals and trying to lay low and keep the peace so that there was no big emotions and big eruptions. And so my boundaries were zilch. And I had lost myself in that second marriage. I actually, the day I ended the marriage, I actually had to call the police because he had choked me out in the bathtub. I was in the bathtub and he was standing over me, choking me out. And after I recovered, I knew what I needed to do. And he only tried to stop me once, and again tried to choke me out and throw me down the stairs. I did not have a cell phone at the time. I was working on a landline. I feel to not give so much detail. Anyway, I sent him to jail, and just sitting back in the aftermath of it, I didn't know who I was. I had lost myself. The two things I could tell you for sure was that my favorite color was purple and that I hated country music. That's how lost I got in that short 1.5/3 years relationship. And I started to do some really, really deep healing. I had to, or else I was not going to live through that, live to tell about it. My first ex decided to take me back to court for a second custody battle, and I didn't understand. Like, I needed, in my era of healing, I needed to really sink my energy into the things that I was passionate about, and my boys were passionate to me and raising them, and he wanted to take half of my custody. And what was really interesting, I found out the final day of our custody hearing, the day that the judge gave us the sentence. Behind the scenes, my lawyer had been gaslighting me. She was a female. I thought she would be on my side, but turns out she had been gaslighting me all along the way. And there was something she said at our very last phone call that clued me into the type of person that she was and the type of lawyer that she was. And I went, oh my gosh, I've spent this insane amount of money to fight for my kids, and you haven't even been fighting with me. I paid you to do that. And just absolutely crushed. I remember after that phone call laying on the floor just sobbing, and I wanted the carpet to swallow me. I felt like the universe had ganged up on me, and I needed to go through some intense healing. Somewhere along there, with the stress of all of it, I started drinking, and it only took that much to turn into a full-blown addiction. And drinking at the wrong times of the day, emotional drinking, having emotional triggers, and subduing them with alcohol. Hiding the alcohol, full-blown addiction. And so now I had a one more thing to navigate and come through. Not only the abuse and the soul loss I had covered up with addiction. It took so much effort to just get out of bed and put on a tank top and shorts and hat. And that's how I would show up for my massage clients in that day. And did I love that part? No, I didn't feel professional, but that was my capacity to show up. I feel like I was still going through some deep healing and deep recovery when I met my third husband. I did come through alcoholism, and I was able to put it aside, and I've been sober for many years. I don't know what that number is. My intention was just that alcohol would slide off my radar, and that it did. When I met my third husband, I said, God, I'm not ready. and God goes, you need him. And I kind of buckled up and said, okay, I guess this is going to be a good thing, because I just had gone through hell. And so I was ready for some really good stuff. And it turns out I needed what I needed, which did not look very pretty. That narcissism looked different than the second marriage. And so I wasn't as quick to acknowledge the red flags and or bypass the red flags, because I thought that it was going to be good. It was going to get better. I was going to have some goodness come into my life. During that intensity, I guess the intensity had just barely started to brew. I wanted that marriage to work. I knew I had also come with some baggage. And so I had put myself in counseling, and the counselor said, I practice EMDR. I think you're a great candidate for EMDR to really get to some root of things that are still surfacing in your life. And what came up were memories of childhood sexual abuse that I had repressed for 40 years. I was a little rattled. Okay, I was a lot rattled. And my partner couldn't hold space for me because of his unhealed stuff. I came home from the counselor that day, and I said, this is what I found out. And he goes, I don't want to know. And he left the room, and I was left to process by myself, and I didn't know how, which actually looked like me closing off. It was not safe to be vulnerable at all. That marriage continued to worsen, and he wanted to bring a certain narrative to the relationship, and I tried to show my support for that, and yet not lose myself, because I had learned that lesson from the previous marriage. But I did find myself giving up my sovereignty, giving up my free will, and I wanted the insanity to stop. I started smoking as a coping mechanism, and that took a long time for me to quit. It became a coping mechanism through other challenges as well. The lies that I became keenly, I was discerning the lies that he was telling me in relationship, completely gaslighting me, completely telling me I was crazy for the things that I was seeing and discerning. And the level of betrayal was off the charts. And I honestly thought, because God told me this is what I needed this third marriage, that something was going to break, something was going to break open, and we would make a breakthrough, and we would be able to come through and be stronger and better on the other side. And then I got very real with myself, and I said, oh, okay, the other party does not understand, does not care that this is causing me turmoil, and so I need to leave. And I called it quits on that marriage, with a very, very different kind of soul loss, because I had gone through a spiritual awakening during that marriage. I had gone through a dark night of the soul, and I was building my intuition up again, somewhat with his assistance, not directly, but in a supportive way. However, the psychic abuse that he was putting me through does not even equate to what he thought he was helping me with. And so I say these things not as woe is me and look at me and poor me and things like that. I have an insane amount of compassion for those who have experienced trauma and all kinds of abuse. And sometimes I'm only a step or two ahead of the person I'm working with in session. For example, I was going through a challenge and I was working through it and I was being very mindful, and I feel like was coming through the other side of it, and not even a week later, a client showed up and brought the exact same challenge to session for her. A week. That's it. That's the only steps ahead that I had. And sometimes I feel like I am working through things in tandem with clients. So this shit show that I have experienced, I truly believe that that's one of the reasons I do what I do. I have the experience. I know what it feels like to be in the trenches. I know what it feels like to wish the carpet and the earth would just swallow me. And I also know we're not meant to stay in that dark place. I also know that I can be a voice of hope for those that are still struggling in the depths. And I know for a fact it does get better. And so this is part of why I do what I do. I do apologize that this video was much longer than I intended it to be. I kept it as short and informative as possible. If you have any questions for me on my journey or how my journey might relate to yours, if I can help in any way or just lend a listening ear, I freaking get it, okay? I truly want what's best for you. I want you to experience healing and peace and sovereignty, and God wants the exact same thing for you, but in exponential amounts that will blow your mind. I love you. Reach out if you would like. Have a great day.